edition of the Energy Week podcast. Ryan Ray alongside the one and only Dr. Energy herself, Ellen Wald. Ellen, how's it going?
Everything is fantastic.
It is a good week, and had to everyone had a great 4th. Did y'all shoot fireworks or anything special for the 4th?
We went to see Yesterday, the movie, and it was hilarious, and I highly recommend it. Everyone should go see Yesterday. Even if you think you don't like the Beatles, you will.
That's how out of the loop I am with movies. I didn't even know that was a movie, so I guess I'm looking forward to Toy Story 4 and Spider-Man and stuff like that. So we're trying to Secret Life of Pets 2. We're trying to get those in.
Toy Story 4 legitimately sounds great because everyone loves a good Toy Story movie. But I would definitely recommend Yesterday to our viewers.
Okay, there we go. We do have a review from iTunes, 5-star, awesome insights from Jimmy from Oklahoma. Ryan and Ellen know their stuff. They speak intelligently on, I can't even say the word intelligently, so I don't know how I can speak intelligently on it, but they speak intelligently on global issues affecting local oil markets. They are also entertaining. Okay, well, good, Jimmy. Thank you for that. It's good to know that we are intelligent and entertaining. And we didn't get called right-wing propaganda. We didn't get called right-wing propaganda, or maybe that's the entertaining part of it. So, thank you, Jimmy.
Maybe our right-wing propaganda is taken as it should be, which is entertainment.
Entertainment. But we do thank you, and if you are a listener, leave a rating and review on iTunes. We accept 5-star and only, so we do appreciate those. Or you can connect with us through the website energyweekpodcast.com, where you can find out everything that's going on with the show. Okay, let's see here, Ellen. Let's get into it first. Now, when you sent this article, let me read the title. I'll talk about what I thought about. But China, this is from Reuters. China refineries curb fuel output after massive new plants stoke glut. You know, we talked about an article. I think it's like last year, early this year. And one of the things in that piece was talking about if you monitor these Chinese refineries, it is an indicator of where the demand is. And I can't remember who wrote it or what the context was, but when I read that, I thought, you know what, we talked about following kind of these Chinese refineries and what's going on, and I'd kind of forgotten all about it. And then here's this piece saying, here's kind of the update on that.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, and we don't get the greatest economic data out of China. I think as most people know, their economic data is notoriously unreliable. They will make themselves seem so much better than they actually are. So you always have to take everything with a grain of salt. But, they don't do what the EIA does, which is give us fairly accurate, or as best as we really can get accurate weekly reports on these kinds of things on refinery output and such. But this is a good indicator. This is, I think the kind of the best data that we're going to get about what is going on with these Chinese refineries. And it does mention in here, it says small scale refiners known as, quote, Teapots, mainly located in Shandong province, are coming under the most pressure to make fresh output cuts, analysts said, extending curbs many of them made in May and June. So we're talking about further cuts below that. And it says teapots have been seen as a bellwether for China's oil demand since 2015. Yes, when they became first-time crude oil importers. But what's interesting is that we generally know in advance how much oil they're going to import because China issues these, basically like quotas. They're like, here, teapots can import a total amount of this per half a year. So, but it's interesting to see that the province's largest independent refinery is actually closing its 240,000 barrel per day plant this week for 2 months of maintenance in the wake of poor margins. So I guess it maybe needed some maintenance. They're not getting such great margins, so they're shutting down for 2 months of maintenance, and that could definitely put a damper on Chinese demand.
Right, and so one of the things I was wondering about is we've looked at a lot of articles talk about the demand growth. There's a lot of articles right now about the demand growth and the economy and slowing, stuff like this. If China and the U.S. can get a trade deal done, is that going to impact this at all? They said that the margins aren't there, but they're not importing any U.S. oil. So would that help or hurt the margins on any level that you can think of?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question because it's hard. It seems like most of the cuts here are just because the margins that they're getting aren't so great.
Right.
They're and they mostly export products to like locally. I mean, I don't mean locally like next door, but within Asia. And so I think it is interesting. I don't know if that would really if there was a trade deal, if that would really affect it, although it could potentially. I mean, maybe people are cutting their orders for fuel products because they're not, getting so much in terms of orders for products and whatnot from U.S. Companies. On the other hand, I did see a report that said that car purchases in China were way up this quarter, and that had to do with apparently they had like huge sales, like like how we have like July 4th sales on cars or Memorial, whatever. So apparently they all like slashed car prices by like 50%, and so lots of people bought cars. Okay, so that like looks great, right? Car purchases in China up, but does that really mean like? But yeah, if you cut the price in half, people are gonna hopefully like go buy that car. Does that mean that we're going to see a corresponding increase in demand for gasoline? I'm not so sure we're going to see that.
Yeah, on that, it's kind of hard to gauge. The markets are obviously worried about economic slowdown. I'll be interested to see if Trump can get the China deal done. How the markets react, not overnight, because you can expect everything to kind of be, rosy glasses, if you will, for at least a day or two. But 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, because we've seen the oil prices kind of slide up temporarily over news, but they can't stay up. So once if the deal gets done, 3 weeks from after that, I'm curious to see, are the articles still we're concerned about economic slowdown, or is it the bright future ahead of us? What will be the talk of the town, if you will?
Yeah, exactly. You gotta wonder about that, especially because if oil prices actually trend down, then maybe these refiners will say, "Oh, hey, margins look better now,
Right.
so we're gonna push cheap product and flood the market with cheap product, and maybe people be like, well, I might as well like buy it now because it's cheap, and that could kind of artificially inflate it." So this is a good question. It really makes you wonder whether how much of an effect the resolution of this trade issue will have for the Chinese market. I think for the U.S. perspective, it will be positive, but I really wonder how much it's going to actually help lift the Chinese economy, like you said, in a long term, like beyond those like 3 weeks of headlines.
Right. Okay. All right, let's go now to this story. I put something on LinkedIn about this, and I guess this came out from a separate publication. But the Russian pipeline we talked about is back online. But according to Reuters, German refineries halt Russian oil imports over contamination. So the pipeline is back, but apparently Germany says not today.
Germany says we don't want your oil.
Yeah, we don't want your stinking oil. Which, again, this is one of those stories that, that you kind of watch, and it was, I don't remember all the numbers, but it's like, okay, this might push prices a little bit higher. And it kind of did, but not really enough. Now that it's coming back on, I'm curious if we'll see an overreaction where prices overreact and fall a little bit more than they should because this pipeline's back online.
Yeah, and there's some word that Poland isn't particularly pleased with what's going on. I mean, it says that they halted their imports after finding, quote, slightly elevated levels. So clearly everyone's like really on edge and looking for this stuff. And they've said like it could take like another 6 months or something, I think, to clean it. The other interesting issue that I just saw was apparently, so Transneft is the Russian firm that owns these pipelines, and it's gotten into a tiff with Rosneft. What is it? I gotta just look this up because these were fighting words that we saw from. I gotta look this up because it's hilarious. But I don't know. I don't really know what the like inner politics are between various Russian quasi-state owned oil activities, but he basically said, Here we go. Russian state-owned pipeline monopoly Transneft launched a broadside at Rosneft on Monday, criticizing the oil producer for dragging its feet over oil quality controls and making unsubstantiated damages claims.
How dare
Transneft
they?
said that Rosneft had been unwilling to help resolve the contaminated oil crisis in the Russian Druzhba export pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, can you really attack Rosneft like that if you're Transneft? I mean, it looked like Putin was about to slam a pen into the Transneft guy's throat when this whole thing first came about. But I don't know. I don't know what so someone I said, anyone comment on this? And someone said, Putin gave one company to a friend and the second to another. And that's the whole story. So I'm thinking maybe Putin should just be careful who he invites to his dinner parties.
So I was curious, when you're talking, they're both in with the term neft.
That just means oil.
Yeah, I put that in the Google Translate. It means oil.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never even thought about that. But learned something new. It means
You know
oil.
what's actually funny? This is like a total digression, but so in Persian, naft is oil also, and so I read something that said it's very interesting to see which languages use certain term for the word tea, and like whether you use like chai or tea, I guess it is, or whatever the other term is. And so Russia uses the word like chai, which is more similar to what you see in Hindi or in Persian. So it's not that like far of a stretch that neft and naft from Persian and it would be the same. Sorry.
Yeah, Google.
I'm not
Google,
actually a linguist, but
yeah, I'm not either. I never thought about the fact they're both with neft, and I was like, well, that's got to mean something. I just put it in Google Translate, and according to Google Translate, it's Azerbaijani for oil, but I don't know whatever that's worth.
Azeri is similar, is in the same family, I think. But anyway, it's kind of interesting that neft is oil, which I find that what's the gas company? Gazprom, and then I think they have an oil arm that's like Gazprom Neft.
Yeah, they want to make sure that they got the oil in there. So let me ask you this: we're looking here at the end of the piece, and it says that the German Oil Industry Association (MWV) confirmed that oil deliveries to Germany via the Druzhba pipeline were partially suspended, but could not say the reason or say when full operations would resume. What other options does Germany have here? I mean, it's one thing if you have a huge demand for this oil, obviously you want it to be cleaned up, not contaminated, but it's not like you can just get it from anywhere.
Hey, Germany, why don't you buy some U.S.-made gasoline? They're going to issue windmills that you can attach to the roof of your car, and they're going to lower the speed limit on the Autobahn to like 5 miles an hour.
But if you just sit here, I mean, Germany has I don't know what kind of ports they have, but they have some oceanfront property. But where else? It's not like you can just. I guess what I'm getting at is you can't just build a new pipeline overnight. You can't bring this in overnight. You can bring it in via a tanker, but I don't know how much leverage they really have here in the long run. And obviously, they believe this is the cheapest solution. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on how much.
Well,
how much leverage do they actually have?
Well, I actually think they have more. They have quite a bit, because even if they get themselves into a situation where they have to import gasoline, apparently this like organic chloride can do a huge amount of damage to your refinery. So for them, it's like I can understand why they'd rather shut down, like not take in oil that might even have a possibility of being contaminated, as opposed to like messing up your actual oil refinery, because that would be horrible for them. So I can see why, and I think because it apparently does that such damage to a refinery, I think that they do have leverage in that sense. Where they're going to get the rest of their gasoline, and gasoline price is going to go up in Germany, probably. I wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly. Okay. All right, let's go now to one of our favorite topics. And I saw someone this weekend or last weekend or whenever on Twitter making fun of the way that some of us Americans call Iran.
Oh, yeah. I saw that.
I think he was saying that it should be Iran. That's I understood what he was saying.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just either. Well, okay. like if I was reading in Farsi, I would say Iran.
Iran.
But like, I mean, look, we say France, we don't say France, like, or we don't say España, we say Spain. So like, come on, give it a break. Like, go around, you don't hear people go around saying Mexico.
Mexico. Well,
like,
if you go
Mexico.
If you're from redneck country like I am, it's if we learn to read and write, that's an accomplishment. Getting us to say it the proper way is highly unlikely. But regardless, Iran, Iran. Ellen, I gotta say, I felt like the U.S. was looking for a reason to go to war with the Iranians. And I'm not sure between the two articles we have today that they're not going to give them one if they're not careful. I mean, what's going on here? Because it feels like Bolton and the U.S. kind of drew a line in the sand, and then it just continues to escalate. And to Trump's credit, he pulled back the bomb strike, but it feels like they're continuing to poke the bear.
Yeah, I mean, this is like very interesting. So, about what's going on with this tanker in Gibraltar. So, another thing that's interesting is there's some discussion over whether it actually is crude oil or not. And so they're saying it is crude oil. Tanker trackers have said that they believe it's actually fuel oil. And it wasn't actually heading for Syria, but it's been known to take fuel oil up to like near Syria and then do some ship-to-ship transfers. Now, look, does it really like matter what's in it? But now I hear here's a new tweet from, or a new information from the UK government. Her Majesty's government of Gibraltar can now confirm, after having received the results of comprehensive laboratory testing, the Grace 1, which was detained in the early hours of Thursday morning, is loaded to capacity with crude oil. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. But like, is Tehran going to seize the UK oil tanker? I mean, they're saying that they told some BP ships or some ships carrying UK flags to, hang out in the Persian Gulf a little longer. Now, from what I understand, and I'm not expert on maritime stuff, but like, can't they just like get another flag? Because like a lot of these ships, like they could be like a Japanese-owned tanker flying a Panama flag, because it's like easier for them to have. Like there's certain countries where like a lot of ships have those flags of those countries, even if they're owned by companies in another country. So like if it's actually a British flagged ship, like can't they reflag it?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I gotta say here. It's good to know that we were called right-wing propagandists, but tanker trackers was called an arm of the CIA or something I saw.
Oh, yeah. They were called an arm of the CIA. That was a good one.
I thought that was so funny because they're using, it's not public data, anybody can purchase it. It's like, surely the CIA has, no offense to tanker trackers, but surely the CIA has better data than what they're using, or at least equivalent.
Look, I don't want to say, like, I don't want to, but I'm just saying, like, I would not assume that the CIA, I think you're giving the CIA a bit too much credit here, or the NSA, or whatever, whoever the U.S. government has figuring out what the heck's going on in the Persian Gulf with these tankers. I would not assume that they are in any way, shape, or form competent.
I didn't say they're competent. I said they had access to the same data, if not better.
They may have access to the same data, but I think that at least what I've learned following this is that it's not just about the data; it's about observing it and being able to analyze and understand what you're seeing, and then being able to I don't want to say like make predictions, but use like understand what you're seeing. And I think that it's become pretty clear that the U.S. government does not spend enough time focusing on that to actually have that good of, an understanding of what's actually moving and being moved from Iran and in tankers going on. I think, yeah.
I'm not saying tanker trackers is the CIA, but I'm also saying I've never seen the CIA and tanker trackers in the same room. That's all I'm saying. saying.
I think we've got the plot of a really interesting thriller movie.
podcast hosts, ship trackers, we're all government
Oh yeah.
spies.
Oh yeah. We're definitely writing. We're definitely writing this into a movie script.
And good for
I'm
tanker
calling my
trackers.
Hollywood agent.
Yeah, they're quoted in this CNN piece, so they are getting some good pub from this. But this, just back to it. Outside of the rights or not, it doesn't feel. Iran's put on a good front and saying, "Yeah, I said it right, and I had to correct myself." It didn't feel natural. Iran's putting on a good front that they're not willing to back down. And it's interesting because I don't know what the media availability is to the citizens, but if it's anything like North Korea, it seems it'd be kind of hard for the citizens of Iran to really know what's going on. But the government feels they got to put up at least a poker face on this deal.
Yeah, my sense is that this is really that the government, that a lot of what the Iranian government is doing is very much geared towards their citizens because they need to show themselves strong. They need to show that they still have ability, they have leverage in this situation. And so even if they don't follow through with this stuff, it's very important for them to stand up, in their parliament essentially and make these proclamations. I mean, think about like how, when we see, Senate hearings and stuff, there's a lot of grandstanding that goes on, where they're supposed to be like questioning someone about like the Mueller report, but instead they like go on and make a speech for, 5-10 minutes. There's a lot of that goes on in Iran. Now, in terms of what other kind of media Iranian citizens have access to, I think it varies greatly. Like you can get some satellite TV, but it'll like often get, they'll come around periodically and like take away your satellite dish, or you can get a VPN, but to access outside websites, but then like it'll stop working. So I think it varies amongst levels of the population, what kind of outside media they've access to.
Okay. And the second part of the article, what's a different article, second part of what I was talking about earlier is the nuclear threats coming from them. They're threatening to restart their centrifuge. I don't know. I'm not a nuclear expert, obviously. I don't know how quick they could actually have a nuclear bomb. It seems if they wanted to go that route. There's always been this talk of these alleged Russian dirty bombs that are out there. I'm not saying they're not out there. I'm just saying like that would seem to be the quicker way to get your hands on something if you want to. But it's interesting. The oil prices, they rise in these threats. But they're not enough to really do anything. As prices come up just a smidge, they go back down. The market is, I guess, somewhat concerned about this, but it seems that the nuclear threat, as it stands right now, is probably not as big of a thing as the taking of the tankers or the bombing of a tanker, stuff like that. This seems to be kind of secondary, but it does catch a headline every now and then. Yeah,
and now Tinker Tractors is saying that they do think that it was actually crude. It said that they weren't able to see the tanker because there was a lot of cloud cover and that she was carrying crude oil, and so and that came from but that was actually an export from April, which is interesting because I think oil exports were cut off until May, right? So if that was an April export from Iran, then that should be okay. There shouldn't be any problem with that. They're allowed to. I mean, no, they're not allowed to send it to Syria. I think they've had sanctions on that all along because of the Syria situation. But so that's interesting. Okay.
Let's turn now back here to the United States from the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. is overflowing with natural gas. Not everyone can get it. Subtitle reads, U.S. gas production is at a record high, but the infrastructure needed to move the fuel around the country hasn't kept up. The title leaves out, it's not the oil and gas industry's fault, though. Is that I think there's plenty ready, willing, and able companies that want to build pipelines and connect some of these places like New York City or stuff. But when you sue the industry, it kind of puts a bad taste in their mouth, I would say.
Oh, yeah. And it's, this is a huge, huge issue. And I know I wrote about it and did some work in this, and particularly in what happened in New England, where they couldn't get enough natural gas in and prices spiked and they had to burn crude oil and coal, which, all the crunchy New Englanders loved, and import liquefied natural gas from Russia, which all the, anti-Russian people loved. And, you know, and then they still won't build any pipelines. And they have this fantastic map that comes with the article. So if you do get a chance to actually take a look at some of the graphics that go along with it, I would really suggest that you really get a sense for how much pipeline infrastructure there is in Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma, and in certain regions like northern Illinois, and I guess what we'd consider the Marcellus Shale region. And then there's like nothing in certain other places. Like there's really so little going to New Jersey and New York, where given the population hub, you would expect there to be a lot more pipelines. Now, when it comes to Florida, there are reasons why we don't have a lot of pipelines in Florida, and that's because you can't really put them that far underground. So like we have one gasoline pipeline in Florida that goes from Tampa to Orlando, and otherwise the entire state of Florida has to get its gasoline from, there's one that I think goes across the panhandle of the state, but otherwise we have to it has to be trucked basically. But we do have some natural gas pipelines, although not anywhere south of, I would say south of the big,
right.
What's it called? The Everglades. I don't think we have south of the Everglades.
So this is a side detour. If you do look at the map, you see in Tennessee, there's those 4 lines that come up from Mississippi. They go through Tennessee and into Kentucky right there. If you trace that back, if you trace those lines back to Louisiana, they kind of get a big congested, and you'll see one shoot through there south of Shreveport.
Yeah.
When I lived from 7th grade until I moved out of my dad's house when I was 21, our property was right next to those pipelines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Was it warm?
No, well, it was
just snow melt over. Well, obviously it was warm as Louisiana.
But yeah, we'd turn on a road and they would cross right over there, so we were right next to them. But and someone told me at the time, they goes, man, this goes all the way up to Maine or wherever they go up to. They go way up there to the northeast. I mean, they go way up there. But anyway, so I saw that. I hadn't thought about that in a while. Well, I don't know. The other problem with this natural gas stuff is, we haven't talked about this much on the show, I don't think, recently at least, is that we're flaring off so much of it. And are we going to wake up one day and go, man, God, we waste a lot of that natural gas? I'm not sure there's a good solution for it, because you got places that need it that don't want it, and the places that have it, they can't make any money off of it.
Yeah, it's such a shame too. I mean, obviously I know a lot about Saudi Arabia, so I'm going to say, in the Saudi case, they were flaring tons and tons of natural gas, and they finally completed what they call the master gas system. Mm-hmm. And now they basically capture it all, feed it into their power plants, and it's made a huge difference for them, except that now they're running into this problem where all their natural gas, it's all associated natural gas. And so I think they're 60% of their power generation comes from natural gas, maybe a little more than that. And they've got to they got to keep their oil production up in order to get enough associated gas to run their electricity and their power plants in the summer months, even though they don't actually want to export. They don't actually want to be producing quite so much oil. Right. So it's kind of a weird thing there. If only we had a way to liquefy it and store it and then ship it to places that need it.
We worked on a project over there in Louisiana where they were going to take an old oil field and seal it up and use it for long-term gas storage. But gas prices were so bad that they they never felt they'd make their money back on it. So they spent a lot of money and then decided not to do it. But as we go to Israel, the same problem there. I mean, hey, we got natural gas. I just want to say this as an aside. We can not have to get too far into the climate change stuff, but I think we can all agree that coal is not the best option as far as the environment's concerned. There's more viable options, but it feels like natural gas has gotten lumped in with coal, and there has to be some nuance in this energy discussion about what is good and viable energy. And natural gas, on some level, going back to the last piece, has gotten a bad rap when it's a far more cleaner and effective energy source than some of this other stuff. And it's more abundant, and it's cheaper, and it has all these pros. And now we're seeing here with Israel, they've got a bunch of it too, and no one can do anything with it. But if we would just roll back some of the rhetoric, it feels like maybe we could spur on some more infrastructure build out, especially for developing nations who need cheap energy.
Oh, yeah. And so one of the interesting things, so Israel's always had this issue where they don't have enough energy and they've always had a difficult time getting it. And everyone's like, oh, but they're in the Middle East surrounded by oil. Why can't they get enough? Well, yeah, okay. We get that. We're not going to get into all of the complex political relationships there. But so like gasoline and has always been notoriously expensive there. And but what's really interesting is that so they found all this natural gas in the Mediterranean. And they're gonna, it's taken them a while. They have like obscene. You think our regulations are bad? Like, oh my God, theirs are way worse. I've read like they had projects tied up for years and years just because one party had like too much of a share of the deal for some reason.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so this is an interesting line in here, which says that, so they're planning to phase out diesel and coal-fired electricity. Great. Why burn diesel for electricity? That's bad. Also, they don't really have coal, so they were reporting that anyway. Replacing most of its gas-fired generation and some solar power. Also great. Another interesting fact about Israel is that, so a lot of apartments for water heating, they have these big, like, they have these big kind of basically the water heaters are on top of the buildings outside on the roofs, and they have little like solar panels to heat them, which is a really like interesting way of doing it then. But anyway,
South Africa has a lot of those in the impoverished areas. They'll put them on their houses there as well.
Yeah. So, but this is what I like. It says that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet is considering banning the import of gasoline and diesel cars because they don't really make cars in Israel, starting in 2030, and gradually switching to vehicles fueled by compressed natural gas or electricity. And I think it's so interesting that they included compressed natural gas in this, because so many people, it's like, ban the internal combustion engine and we're going to have electric cars. Now, for Israel, this might be a situation where electric cars would work, because Israel is not a very big country, and most of the time people don't like spend their time commuting to Jordan. Like it's, or you don't commute to like the Sinai Peninsula for work. You don't commute to Syria. So most of these people are only driving their cars in Israel, and it's not a very big country and people don't drive that far distances. So this might actually be a case in which electric vehicles could actually be useful for larger parts of the population than we would say in the United States. But also compressed natural gas is really important. And I think a lot of this we get skipped over. Like we hear, oh, buses are switching from diesel to electric, and they're missing the compressed natural gas step. I've actually spoken with some people who do this. Compressed natural gas is a big thing in Jacksonville. And they're like, it's such a better step. Like investing in electric buses at this point is so risky because the technology is not right there. Like what's wrong with compressed natural gas buses? And they have buses are basically like a lot of people take buses in Israel. It's a huge form of public transportation. And the idea that they would all switch over to compressed natural gas is, I think, a really positive step.
T-Boone Pickens, it was big on that, I believe, in the early 2000s. That was his big push. And it kind of, and I wonder, going back now, thinking about it, I wonder how much of that was tied to the dramatic increase in natural gas prices kind of put the kibosh on that. Whereas if maybe after the price collapsed, if that started catching steam, if it would be more of a, I wonder if it was a timing issue or if it was just the technology wasn't there. I haven't gone back and kind of looked at all what was being said back then, but I remember where I was from, that was a big deal. They're going to build a natural gas plant there to build cars.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think I'm not that my experience is in any way reflective of like the general trend, but I was like in grade school, I think, when they switched all of our school buses in our district to natural gas, to compressed natural gas.
Oh, really?
And that was like in the that was like the mid 90s.
See, the problem I had with it was when they were talking about it is like, how do you get, it's kind of like with EVs, how do you get charging stations or fill-up stations for compressed natural gas? Like, how do you make enough where people can do, fill up their pump? I don't know enough about how they even fill them up. I never see it done, but that's always the one thing I wondered was, because it would seem to be the EV you can put, at your Kroger or Walmart, you can put a station there, but this would seem to have to be at the gas station.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an interesting question. I think it would really work more for buses that are following assigned
Yeah.
routes, and that seems like a much better. But like, why not trucks? Like, what about trucks like hauling between? They have like truck stop, way stations on highways. Why can't we do that?
Well, I know that some oil and gas companies at one point had their trucks that would run off of that. Like people who are going around checking the pipelines and stuff, they have kind of like you're saying a set route, and so they could just fill up at their own. The company could build up a fill up station at one of their facilities, and they could fill up there. So I think you're right. Maybe something that's a little bit more stable route could do something like that.
But I think it's a really interesting case where you really could make an argument that electric vehicles could actually be valuable and useful for large parts of the population, simply because most of them don't actually travel that far in a car, and there's a lot of ride sharing. There's a lot of like taxi, like people just don't people don't commute the way that we do it. There's just not the same kind of, and so it could be really interesting.
Well, it's a lot more like a big city environment than it is the United States of America, where I live 45 minutes south of Fort Worth. So if I'm going to Fort Worth, it's a 45-minute drive, and the odds of me getting on a bus with 50, 60 other people is pretty slim because of when I want to go, the convenience. But if you're in downtown Fort Worth, then there's a lot more commonality on what you want to do.
Yeah. But also, I'd say we regularly get in the car and drive, 4.5 hours south to visit in-laws. But like in Israel, that would be like half the country, and then like, where else are you going to go? Like where are you going to go? Like I said, you're going to go into Syria. So,
right. No, it's yeah. So maybe a viable solution there. Okay, final article of the day: BP oil tanker shelters in Persian Gulf on fear of Iranian retaliation.
Oh my God, you're going to be they're going to think you're a native Persian speaker.
I'll be called a propagandist for the whatever
the IRGC.
IRGC. Oh, we got ships hiding, ships getting blown up. We talked, we didn't talk about this, but there was a discussion about 10 years ago when all those ships were getting hijacked. It seemed like every week they were hijacking a ship. Now, obviously, this isn't pirates you're worried about. This is actually a government that has a military, or a navy in this case, that could come out there and blow you up or take you down. But is there other measures that private companies can do to protect themselves other than hiding?
Yeah, I was going to say, get the flag of another country.
Switch the flag. Of course, tanker trackers, being that they are a CIR operative, would out you, so you would have no shot there. Yeah.
Well, that's actually been done before. I think. Well, I heard recently that the Indian government is like sending like ships to escort its tankers. So you can get your government to escort you. I don't know. I mean, so far it seems like the same type of mines were used. Is there anything they can do to like prevent them from attaching those like little mines? I don't really know that much about this, so I'm just kind of I don't know. I like this quote from Olivier Jacob, who's the managing director of Petromatrix. He said, "It's a psychological game that's being played. Nobody wants to be that one whose vessel is seized in a..."
Yeah. You're right.
There's only going to be one, and you don't want to be that one.
You don't want to be that one. You don't want to be that one. But yeah, I don't know. We kind of go back to what we talked about earlier. The U.S. has said, hey, if you mess with our friends, or our friends of friends, or our in-laws, friends of our friends, it's third cousin twice removed type deal. Anyone, and the ship here is concerned. Can the U.S. They said the Fifth Fleet down there, or whatever it is, can they not protect them coming out?
I don't know. Maybe not. I think they're basically saying, hey, you want us to protect you? Well, chip in, guys, because it's not tankers going to the United States. It's tankers going to China and South Korea and Japan and India. So, pony up a little, which is definitely consistent with Trump's overall message that the United States, at least if it's going to have the strongest military in the world, would like its allies to contribute funding, like for NATO. They're like, we're contributing the troops, you contribute the dollars. So at least there's a consistent message there. Who's making a killing in all this? The insurance companies.
Oh, God, yes. I know it.
It says insurance costs for both tankers and their cargo soared in the aftermath of the attacks, while some wary owners are now choosing to refuel elsewhere. I'm not really sure what that means. Why would you refuel? Like, where else are you going to refuel? I don't know what that means. Sometimes this article comes from Bloomberg, so sometimes they say things where you're like, what?
Yeah. I don't know. I got a question for you before we get off here. Change subjects a little bit. Josh and I talked about this on the Textile Gas podcast this morning. This time last year, the collective industry said, basically, if prices would be where they are right now, the industry would be okay. We are reading headlines repeatedly saying that, hey, the industry's over, the shale play's done, they're all going out of business, this, that, and the other. Now, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm saying, what has shifted from where, in your opinion, what has shifted so much that last year we would have said this price would have been great for U.S. shale producers to now it's the end of they might all be out of business by December?
So I think, first of all, it's the media narrative. I think that once you see a headline in like one or two places, everyone likes to latch onto this and they like to adopt the same headline. So once there was an article, we saw a couple things about like, maybe things aren't so hunky-dory. Suddenly the narrative became shale's over, shale's done for. Mm-hmm. The truth is, like, we've seen that so many times, right? How often have we seen that? Like, we saw that when price was like $27. They were like, it's done for, it's over. They've killed and then like, no, shale's so resilient. They have technology, like, you don't really know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe some companies will fold, others will eat them up. I mean, I think it's really like a media pile-on thing. And yeah, if price, like back in like 2016, if we talked about prices like that, everyone would have been thrilled. It would have been like, yeah, shale saved. I think that there is also some recognition that there's more nuance in the industry than was originally understood to be like there's actually more nuance going on than just break-even price per barrel.
Right. Yeah, so some of the things that we talked about, get your opinion on this, was, first off, and I try to use this analogy a lot when I think about business stuff, is go back to school. If you're a B, C-type student, and you get like a 10 out of 100, a really low F, it takes a long time to bring that average back up. And so even in the business world, you have a really, really bad year. If you're not a stellar company, or 2 years, then all of a sudden, it could take a while. And so some of the shale deals we saw last year looked borderline at best, to put it nicely. And so you could see some of that coming back to fruition, where that they overpaid last year, and you're doing it. I do think you're right about the media narrative. It's just, I don't know. I kind of hit me because it feels like everyone right now is saying, "Hey, the end is nigh." I'm not saying maybe it is, maybe it didn't. I don't know, but it's like, man, I just know last year we're talking about 55, 60, 65. That would be the greatest thing ever. The industry will go on forever, but now that we're here, it's in Wall Street putting pressure on the investors obviously has something to do with it. I'm just not sure. I'm not exactly sure where that's going to end up. Because Wall Street also put pressure on them to continue to drill, expand their drilling programs. So now they're trying to rein them in. It is going to take some time to adjust, and maybe they can't. We'll have to see.
Yeah, and I just think that like you can't assume that the industry as we knew it like 4 years ago is not the same industry that we have today, and we may not, and the industry that we're going to see in 2 years ago is not going to be the same one we have today. Just because it's changed doesn't mean that it's dead. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it may look really different, but it's still shale oil industry. It's just it may look different from what it looked like today.
Okay. So. All right, Ellen, where will you be this week?
Let's see. I'm going to be on BBC Global Business News talking about the Qatari emir's visit with President Trump and what that means. Tape that today.
Okay.
And then I'll be on Forbes and investing.com later in the week.
All right. Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, Oil and Gas Contractors Connect. Have a new show. I don't have a title for it, but I'm getting ready to launch, and with Ben Samuels. So details on LinkedIn about that coming soon. Ellen, it was good to be back. Hope everyone had a great 4th of July, and we will talk to you next week.
And let's just remind readers. Next week, Dean Foreman is coming on to talk about this latest economic report. So if listeners have any questions they'd like us to ask him, please send those in.
Yep, energyweekpodcast.com, Twitter, LinkedIn. Nate will link to all that in the show notes. You can get us. We did have a question that came in last time that we got to answer. But yeah, so look forward to that. All right, we'll talk to everyone next week.